Hello there. So, on a day of remembering the ultimate sacrifice that so many made, all we hear about is the sleazy antics of our MPs. As per usual, please like, subscribe and comment below. And when subscribing, please do press that little bell, but also select the all option, or you won't get any notifications when I publish a new video. The more you weigh and measure these MPs, the more featherweight their morals prove to be. But the money and benefits of their position can be measured in miles and tons. As more stories emerge of second jobs for MPs, some at an hourly rate that many would be happy to take home annually, our anger just increases. And now we have 3 politicians, 1 female Labour MP and 2 SNP MPs, allegedly stoking up on drink on a flight to Gibraltar to honour those that fell in the war, resulting in one of them being taken off the aircraft in a wheelchair, and the other 2 were leery with the ground staff because their COVID passes didn't work. Here's what a defence source is quoted as saying about the Labour MP. She drank throughout the journey. She was kind of helped off the aircraft, but made it through to the baggage area. In order to avoid a scene, she was popped on a wheelchair from the baggage area to the transport that was laid on. She was then put in the hotel straight away and given a drink watch throughout the night. A drink watch. So some poor swines, maybe a female squaddy or 3, had to stay awake with her overnight to keep her safe. At least she had her junket cut short and was on the next plane home. Should have been made to walk. Now this was a 3-day, 15 MP visit to Gibraltar for Armistice Day, and 20% of them were about as respectful to the situation as sending a pile of dog poo. According to reports, Tory MP James Gray said, "These 3, as I understand it, were in a BA lounge in Heathrow and made full use of the facilities." And he also said that they were pretty well oiled. Now you can bet your bottom dollar that had 3 drunken sailors embarked on this course of action, they would be banged up in Gibraltar's cells right now. Now, as I understand it, the Speaker of the Commons, Lindsay Hoyle, has stopped the sale of alcoholic beverages to MPs in Parliament for the duration of the pandemic. So maybe these MPs thought they deserved to go on a bit of a bender and let their hair down. But if any of that hospitality ends up on any MP's expenses sheet, then the Tower of London needs to be reopened. The Defence Secretary Ben Wallace remarked, "This type of behaviour shows a lack of respect for the enduring work of the armed forces. The Armed Forces scheme is an opportunity for both parliamentarians and the military to understand each other. This behaviour puts military personnel in a difficult position and risks undermining respect for Parliament." Respect for Parliament. Yes, and the Tories need to be spoken to as well. 2 of them were reportedly out drinking until 2 a.m. The question is, do MPs have a drinking problem? Maybe the sale of alcohol needs to be permanently banned from Westminster. Let's help them dry out. What are our troops meant to make of that sort of behaviour by the people that could vote on whether or not they go to war? But what gets me is that I thought there were rules about not letting drunk passengers get on an aircraft to start with. In fact, here's what The Sun reported in October this year. It is a criminal offence to be drunk on an aircraft. It's also prohibited to drink any of your own alcohol, including any duty-free bottles that you've brought onto the flight. Cabin crew have the right to refuse to serve any passenger at their discretion. But if things get out of hand, offenders can receive a maximum sentence of 2 years imprisonment according to the Civil Aviation Authority, or fines up to 80,000 quid. And together with the change in barometric pressure, alcohol can be devastating at altitude. But let's see what happens to these 3 MPs here, shall we? But given those rules, why were they let on the aircraft in the first place? And why did they keep getting drinks served to them? Now, James Gray is the chairman of the Armed Forces Parliamentary Group, and he said that although he has some responsibilities here, he couldn't do anything about these 3 MPs because they were civilians on the way to the event and not at it. Now, I call BS on that, unless those MPs paid for their flights themselves. If not, from the moment they started out in a ministerial car or claim mileage or for a taxi, then they are public representatives every step of the way, and as far as I'm concerned, they should behave accordingly. It's completely different from them hoovering up drink and drunkenly staggering about on holiday when they've forked out their own cash for the entirety. If the taxpayer funded the trip, then surely we should expect and get a modicum of decorum. Anyway, many of these now discredited MPs will be lining dutifully up at the cenotaph or their local war memorials, after standing silently back and watching lawyers drag aged soldiers through the courts again and again, hoping that the same evidence will in the end get a different judgment and get them sent to prison. With one witch hunt ending with the death of Dennis Hutchings. They've sat dumb in the chamber as all and sundry enter the country and get given 4-star hotel rooms and keys to houses, all while our own homeless, many of them veterans, lie forgotten in doorways on the streets. And it's not just one party, it's across the board. But the nation's eyes are now focusing on the antics of our politicians. And what do we see? MPs who have time for massively lucrative second jobs, or to write a book, or to run a property empire. And most of us would reckon the only reason they get money out of those second jobs is because they have the letters MP after their name. So we have to assume that all these MPs have empty constituency in trays, that they've successfully sorted out all their constituents' many problems, that all their committee work is up to date. Yeah, pull the other one. But now for some good Brexit news about the city. But before I get onto that, I just want to say a massive thank you to all my Super Thanks, Patreon and PayPal supporters, as well as those that do buy a mug with my mug on it. Links in the descriptions box below. You really do help me keep this channel going. Now, you've seen how much effort the EU, especially France, is pouring into their war on UK fisheries. They have spared no expense or political capital in trying to ram their fishing boats into our waters, because as far as the EU is concerned, those waters are still theirs to do with as they please. But now think about the colossal trade in financial services that London has, that Brussels eyes very greedily. I would reckon that behind the scenes, this fight is as vicious as it comes, concerning the EU trying to get financial services decamped out of London and into what few significant exchanges the EU has. By now, the EU and our own anti-Brexit rabble were fervently hoping that the City of London finance machine would be lying in rubble on the Canary Wharf. That the square mile would now be bereft of bowler-hatted brokers, with tumbleweed the only thing moving there. But this has so far not worked out quite as the Eurocrats were expecting. They gave London a deadline of June next year to be out of their picture. But the city has proved extraordinarily resilient, and there has been no mass exodus of business or finance workers into the EU. And that has resulted in the EU being unable to wrest control over euro clearing from London. Further, they have no hope of meeting their own June 2022 deadline for taking control of euro clearing. So once again, the European Union has been forced to accept that London will be their main clearinghouse for the foreseeable future, and have extended the ability of EU banks to access London markets indefinitely. What this means is that EU banks are able to continue to access the UK's over £500 trillion clearing market on what appears to be an open-ended licence, no end date. And if they hadn't extended London's lucrative euro clearing rights, then financial stability would have been damaged, and reports are suggesting that over 230,000 EU banking jobs would have been at risk. And this will needle Brussels to the core. Having to rely on Brexit UK for their liquidity must be very upsetting. Wonder how many of those huge EU Commission pandemic relief loans and funds will be set up using London. So I can imagine how desperately hard the EU must be working behind the scenes to try and tear that business out of London. And it's therefore imperative that we maintain control of it. And the longer London persists as their main market, the more embedded it becomes. And this might be one of the reasons why Brussels is so keen to do as much damage to the UK as it can. And right now, the EU is gearing up to make life as difficult as it can for the people in Northern Ireland in its push to tear the UK up. And the UK is getting together to retaliate should the UK trigger Article 16 to remedy the situation in Northern Ireland. But as I said yesterday, the legal basis that they rely on to do that will be interesting to see, especially if they try to use the Trade and Cooperation Agreement to attack us for what they see as failings under the Withdrawal Agreement, a totally different treaty. In fact, I'm told that the Withdrawal Agreement is only mentioned 4 times in the later Trade and Cooperation Agreement, and 2 are references to definitions and 2 relate to tax. So there is no legal link between the 2 as far as I can tell. Now, if the EU does rip into us, wouldn't that mean they would have to stop their banks accessing UK liquidity markets? So what's your opinion on our MPs? Please like and comment below.